This is a true story. On a cold morning in February 1957, in a quiet neighborhood of Philadelphia, someone made a horrifying discovery. A little boy, beaten and bruised, wrapped in a blanket and tucked inside a large cardboard box. The moment that box was opened, a terrible secret spilled out, a mystery that would haunt the city and the whole of the United States for generations. The police arrived fast. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the wooded area. The boy was so small, no more than 5 or 6 years old, and his frail body sent a shiver through everyone who saw him. His face was swollen, bruised, but eerily peaceful in death. The blanket was stained, his clothes dirty. There was no identification, no note, nothing to tell them who he was or why someone would do this to him. As news spread across Philadelphia, the city was gripped by sorrow and fear. How could such a tragedy happen? Who would abandon a child like this? And where was his family? The more people thought about it, the more questions came. The police released a sketch, asked neighbors, made posters, but still, no one came forward. It was as if the boy had appeared out of thin air and then just vanished again. Except now, he was gone forever. For weeks, detectives searched for a name. They treated every lead with hope. People remembered a missing child. Someone thought they saw a boy matching his description. Others thought they saw the box. But every tip seemed to dead end. Time passed, and the little boy became a ghost in the city's memory, known only as the boy in the box. Inside the police station, investigators sat around maps and photographs. They debated theories. Did he wander away from home? Was he kidnapped? Or was this something far more sinister, that someone caused his death, then hid his body, hoping no one would ever find him? The darker possibility made everyone's stomach twist. Meanwhile, families across Philadelphia looked at their own children differently. Parents tucked their kids in tighter. Mothers whispered bedtime prayers. Fathers drove their children to school, hearts heavier than before. The idea that a child could suffer so much and nobody would notice terrified everyone. Even decades later, weak clues persisted. A fingerprint here, a lead there, but no name. In the years after, the case would become a symbol of unresolved grief, a stain on the city's soul. Generations of detectives would try to solve it. Amateur sleuths and true crime fans would study old newspaper clippings and faded sketches, hoping to bring peace to a boy whose story never had an ending. But in the freezing February air back in 1957, something far more important was missing. Answers. And without answers, there can be no justice. Then, many years later, with DNA and new technology, came a breakthrough. Genealogists worked tirelessly, tracing branches of family trees, connecting dots, hoping against hope to find who this child was. But even as his identity was finally revealed, the darkness around how he died refused to fade. Who killed Joseph Augustus Zarelli? Why did nobody claim him? And the most chilling question of all, does his killer still walk free? As the community waited for resolution, the sense of dread grew deeper, not lighter. Because even if you know the boy's name, you still don't know his ending. And then, just when it feels like there might be a breakthrough, a new piece of evidence surfaces, shifting everything. The investigation takes a sharp turn, and what once seemed like a closed box opens again, revealing more mystery, more horror, and the possibility that someone out there still holds the key to the boy's fate. When the new piece of evidence appeared, everything inside the Philadelphia Police Department shifted. It was a small envelope, yellowed with age, sent anonymously. There was no name, no return address, Nothing on the outside except a single word. Look. Inside was a photograph. It showed a house, an old, broken-down home with peeling paint, a sagging roof, and a small shed beside it. On the back of the picture, written in shaky handwriting, were 4 chilling words. He lived here once. Detectives stared at the photo. Was this a joke? A hoax? Or someone trying to clear their conscience after years of silence? They didn't know. But something about the envelope felt real. Too real. They sent officers to check the address written faintly in pencil on the bottom corner. The place was deep in a wooded area outside the city, a location easy to miss unless you knew where to search. If the picture was real, maybe the boy lived here. Maybe his killer did too. The next morning, a team drove out to the old property. The wind was cold, and branches cracked under their boots as they walked through the trees. The house looked exactly like the photo, broken, abandoned, almost forgotten by the world. Detective Harris stepped inside first. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. The wooden floor creaked with every step. He could almost imagine small footsteps running across the boards many years ago. But the house was empty. No furniture, no sign of life, no clues. Then one officer called out from behind the house. "There's a shed back here." The shed was old, the door half rotted. When they pushed it open, the hinges screamed. Inside was darkness, thick and heavy, like something didn't want to be found. Harris shined his flashlight. Cobwebs stretched across the corners. Boxes and broken tools lay scattered on the floor. But then something glinted under the light. A small metal bracelet. It was tarnished, but the shape was clear. A child's bracelet. Tiny, fragile, and on it was a single etched letter. J. Harris froze. His heart thumped. The boy's name, Joseph Augustus Sorelli, began with J. Could this be his? Or maybe someone else's child? They collected it carefully and placed it into evidence. Just when Harris thought they had found the only clue, another officer shouted from behind the shed, "Harris, you need to see this." Behind the shed, buried under a collapsed piece of wooden fencing, was a large, rusted, metal trunk. It looked heavy, as if someone had tried to hide it long ago. Mud covered the sides. Moss grew on the top. The lock was broken. Harris knelt down. Something about this trunk felt wrong. Too intentional. Too hidden. He grabbed the edges and tried to lift the lid. It resisted at first, then snapped open with a bang. Inside were old clothes, newspapers, broken toys, a tiny shoe, and worst of all, a thick wool blanket that looked eerily familiar. The same pattern, the same stitch, the same color as the blanket wrapped around the boy in the box. The detective stared at it, breathless. "This can't be a coincidence," Harris whispered. The trunk felt like a message from the past, a reminder that this place held secrets no one ever told. Someone lived here. Someone with a child. Someone who hid things. And someone who didn't want the world to know. They bagged everything, photographed everything, and just as they finished, one officer noticed something scratched into the wood inside the lid. Letters, carved by a small hand, shaky, uneven. "Help me." A chill ran through every officer there. The woods felt suddenly colder. The house behind them seemed to stare. Harris felt the hairs on his arms rise. We need to find who owned this place now." Back at the station, they searched through old property records. Most files were incomplete. Pages were missing. And then they found the name. A man. A man with a criminal past. A man who had lived alone for years, then suddenly disappeared around the same time the boy was found. The file listed his last known location. It was nowhere near Philadelphia. It was hundreds of miles away. Harris felt something twist in his stomach. If he ran for a reason. And then the phone rang. An officer on the other end sounded breathless. "Detective Harris?"
"You need to get down here. We found something in the trunk, something we missed the first time." "What is it?" Harris asked. The officer hesitated. It's another note, and it's addressed to you." Harris felt his blood turn cold. "Detective, it says the killer is still alive." Detective Harris hurried down the hallway, his footsteps echoing like soft thunder. The note found in the trunk sat inside an evidence bag on the table, small and yellowed, as if it had been waiting decades for him. The officer handed it over. "We didn't see it at first. It was tucked between two pieces of cloth." Harris slipped on gloves and carefully opened the bag. The note was written on faded paper, torn at the edges. The handwriting was uneven, almost shaky, like someone wrote it while terrified. It said only 5 words: "He watches. He never left." Harris felt his throat tighten. Someone had written this long ago, but the message didn't feel old. It felt alive, like a warning passed through time. "Do we know who wrote it?" he asked. The officer shook his head. "Could be the boy, could be someone else, but look at the corner." Detective Harris stared at the phone record as if it were a trick of the light. A phone registered to Joseph Augustus Zarelli, a boy dead since 1957, had sent the photograph. That was impossible. Completely impossible. But the number was real. The timestamp was real. And the photo, that shadow in the window, that was real too. "Run it again," Harris said quietly. "We already did," he whispered, 3 times. Harris felt the room closing in. Either someone was using the dead boy's identity to send messages, or someone wanted him to believe the impossible. He grabbed his coat. "We're going back to the house." Night had fallen by the time they reached the property. The woods were darker now, the trees swaying like they were whispering secrets to each other. The air smelled of damp earth and cold wind. Harris stepped out of the car, flashlight in hand. The house stood silently in the dark, the same broken windows staring like hollow eyes. The shed, the trunk, the lingering chill, all of it felt heavier now, as if the place knew they were coming. One officer pointed to the ground. Fresh footprints. They were small, child-sized, leading toward the house, disappearing at the front door. Harris swallowed hard. Sweep the place. Inside, the house was colder than outside. The air felt trapped, unmoving. Harris moved from room to room. Nothing. Just dust and darkness. Then he heard it. Tap. A soft sound, like a fingernail tapping wood. He froze. Tap, 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 coming from the back of the house. He followed the sound, heart pounding. It led him to a narrow hallway, then a small door he hadn't noticed before. The tapping stopped. He reached for the handle. Before he could turn it, his radio crackled loudly. "Detective Harris, sit tight. We traced the signal again." "What did you find?" Harris whispered. The radio hissed, then the voice came through.
The phone sending those messages, it just pinged a new location. Harris frowned. Where? A pause. The signal is coming from inside that house. Another pause. Detective, it's coming from the room you're standing in front of. Harris felt his blood turn to ice. He slowly looked down at the door handle. It turned itself. Just a tiny movement, like someone on the other side was gripping it. Detective Harris, the officer's voice trembled through the radio. You're not alone in that house. The door in front of him creaked, opened an inch. Air rushed out, as cold as a winter grave. Harris raised his flashlight. Hello? He whispered. A small shadow moved inside the room. Then a voice, no louder than a breath, slipped through the darkness. Why didn't you save me? The door slammed shut. The flashlight flickered, and all the radios went dead.